The purpose of life is to live a life of purpose. And while living a purposeful life, how about you make yourself financially future-proof and make millions of lives around you better? Well, this is all we will be discussing today in the interview with none other than Jay Samit, because no one teaches this better than Jay. Just in case you've not heard about Jay Samit, he is a former independent chairman of Deloitte, has been a CEO of Nasdaq listed company, and has written the best-selling book for which we had interviewed him before, called Disrupt You, that has been translated in over 24 different languages. Jay also helped, oh, that's the one. I've read it in my Kindle edition. There are hundreds of stories, hundreds of companies that Jay has worked with, not just companies, Fortune 500, but he has also worked with the President of the United States and even Pope. So Jay, I'm so excited to welcome you onto the show. Welcome, Jay.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. So we did talk a lot about Disrupt You last time, your first book, and you have authored another book called Future Proofing You. In the previous one, oh yeah, that's how it looks like. Great. Disrupt You, we did talk about the ideas of how to create a disruptive business. You talked about having a disrupt suitcase, branding, pivoting your energies, design, production, marketing, sales, capital. You touched on everything. I mean, that was good enough to make somebody future-proof. But then you came up with another book called Future Proofing You. Why Future Proofing You? What is extra in this book?
So I never thought I'd write a second book. The response to Disrupt You has been humbling and amazing. I've heard from people in 140 countries that send me emails thanking me for changing their lives. I didn't change their life, they did it. I just helped them hold up a mirror. But I got this one email that gnawed at me. It was from a millennial that said, this is all great, but I could never do it. And I didn't know why I couldn't reach certain people. And so I decided this crazy experiment. Could I take a young millennial, grew up on welfare, and mentor him one day a week from basically homeless to self-made millionaire? And that's the story in Future Proofing You. And by weird coincidences, you know Vin Clancy, the young man. And I synthesized down our mentoring sessions down to 12 truths that anyone can follow. And if you follow these truths, you will have success. This isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. This isn't about overnight. This is about a process. And Vin was willing to work harder than most people for 1 year of his life so he can live the rest of his life in a manner that most people can't.
So when you chose Vin to be your mentee, I mean, I have personally met Vin long before, when he was still doing his growth hacking seminars in London. And when I first heard the name from you, I was like, might be somebody. It didn't click to me that it's Vin Clancy, the one I know. Why Vin? Why not anybody else, really? What was special about Vin?
So the purpose of the book and the experiment of trying to pick somebody to do that is it didn't matter who the person was. I had to go for the first person I pick. I had to use them. I didn't want to sort through people and, hey, I'm going to teach somebody how to play golf. Hey, you young Tiger Woods, come over here. If you cherry pick the person, it's not valid. So I was at a business breakfast and everybody got to say a few things and stand up and talk. And Vin happened to be there he was new to California, new to the States, wanted to figure out his life. And he just seemed as good as any other candidate. And so I talked him into it.
And in the book, you do talk about 12 truths. And the first one is one of my favorites, and I've read a lot of literature on that, is the growth mindset. And we have discussed about it, what is fixed and growth mindset. But what I would like to know, some techniques, how can somebody cultivate a growth mindset?
It comes down to the very first thing about success is believing in yourself. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So my concern was Vin grew up in an environment that has more chance of not having that, feeling that you're downtrodden or the world's against you or whatever it might be. So I had to find a way to get him into a growth mindset as quickly as possible. And I used a technique called the Pygmalion effect. Now, Vin didn't find out that I lied to him in our first meeting until he read the book. And I'm not proud of lying, but here's why. A professor went to a school, tested all the kids and told the teachers 3 kids would be super learners, super achievers. They just burst out this year and have great results. And at the end of the year, those 3 kids excelled. But the professor lied. He just picked 3 names out of the hat. But he knew that if you told people they were special and you treated them special, they would become special. So I told Vin that I interviewed over 100 candidates, and he was the only one with all the attributes to be a self-made millionaire, when in fact, I only interviewed 1 person. And in the book, I included a note that he wrote to himself after our first meeting, where he basically said he didn't believe in any of this, but if this old guy believes in him, he'll go along with it. So that was the genesis. But I will tell you, when in his first month, he made more than $50,000, that growth mindset was firmly in place. And when his business hit hardships, it didn't deter him. It just got him to say, that isn't working. Let me try something else that does. And today he is future-proof. After he made his first million, thing that got him through the end of the year to stick with it, because this was no dating, no going to the bars, no watching TV, a whole year of working 7 days a week. He knew that he was going to take a year off to travel the world. And he was able to do that, not because he had $1 million. You can't live the rest of your life on $1 million, but because he knew he was future-proof, meaning he could settle down anywhere and at any time, do it again. And that's a great feeling, to not be looking for that job or somebody else to be in control of your destiny.
When did you tell him that he was the only one you interviewed?
I never told him. When he got the book and he read it, he sent me an email. I'm like, oh yeah. So that was a little bit of a surprise to him.
So I'm just wondering, is it possible that he can take it otherwise? Maybe not now, because he's already achieved. Now he knows what he's capable of. But if this would have happened midway, would you tell him midway the journey or at the end of the journey? And the reason I'm asking is because he thought, like the story of the teacher and 3 kids you told, if you tell those 3 kids in somewhere in between that, oh, I randomly chose you, their mindset will start playing games.
Right. So it became irrelevant, the why, because once he saw that he was doing it, I wasn't the one getting the business. I wasn't the one making the money. He was doing it all on his own. I didn't give him any contacts. I didn't give him any capital. So once he unleashed that, there's no turning back. You can't tell somebody that completed a marathon that they're not good enough to run a marathon. They already did it. And so much of our educational system was designed to create workers, to have you work for somebody else to make their dream come true. When in fact, everybody that we admire in life, the designers of our clothes, the singers of our favorite songs, the people that make movies, whatever, are people that didn't follow the norm and went out and did something on their own. And inevitably, all of them failed along the way. Failing is part of the process. You cannot achieve without failing.
And that you mentioned about the unique superpower when you identify it. How does one go and identify that they have one particular superpower skill that they can harness and build something out of it?
The easiest way is pay attention when friends are asking you for advice. Because they're asking you because they recognize something in you on that topic or that expertise. Nobody's calling me up for fashion tips, okay? But a lot of CEOs call me when their business has problems. Because deal structure is one of my super strengths at this point. But we all have unique gifts and we all have a unique outlook on the world. And it's from that viewpoint that you will see things that others missed. And that is the basis, because successful entrepreneurs don't sell things, they solve things. No one ever went into a store to buy a 2 millimeter drill bit. They wanted a 2 millimeter hole, so they had to buy the drill bit. They needed to solve that problem. And so if you can identify a problem that enough people have, you're one click away from 5 billion customers. You only have to be right once. And that's why virtually every 26 hours, there's a new self-made billionaire. Let that think in. You know, Kylie Jenner became a billionaire at 22 years old. What did she do differently? She didn't go to college. She didn't have anything special. Oh, well, she's a Kardashian. Well, there were no billionaires in the Kardashians. So why can't anyone emulate that same process? And so that's what I lay out in Future Proofing You.
But I think with the most people there, even though some people do identify that this is my unique superpower skill, there is still a lot of fear. And you do give some tips on how to use fear rather than overcome fear, really. You know, how the relationship with fear should be in order to use it and harness it.
So my third truth in the book is about harnessing fear and using fear. My biggest pet peeve are all the gurus trying to shake you down for money on the internet that tell you fear isn't real, fear is in your head, you know, get past fear, overcome. You cannot get past fear. So anybody that has fears and thinks that they're not good enough because they have the fears, you're getting the wrong message. Everyone is afraid. We are hardwired to be afraid. The oldest, most central part of our cerebellum is what's known as the lizard brain. It's that fight or flight response. The very first thing a person sees when another person comes is this person going to kill me? Is this creature going to eat me, right? So you can't get away from that fear. But if you were walking down the street thinking about, should you start a business? I'm afraid of losing my job. I'm afraid of embarrassing myself. I'm afraid of losing my money. I'm afraid of losing family money. I'm afraid. If there's a big giant bus filled with dynamite coming, jumping the sidewalk, about to hit you, you're not thinking about those fears. You're thinking about jumping out of the way of the bus. You don't care how embarrassing you look. You have an existential threat. You are going to die, which means you can prioritize fear. So keep in your time, if you're afraid of taking a business and doing these steps because of all those little fears, realize that today you're trading a day of your life, a week of your life, a month of your life, a year of your life for a job that's getting you nowhere and doesn't allow you to live. Or you want to wake up one day and be on the wrong side of 50 with white hair, and you will have given up your whole life just like that bus. For what? Because you were afraid that you might fail? You only got one life. Why not use it? Why not take those chances? And if you don't believe me, ask your grandparents or go to visit a senior center and ask old people their biggest regrets in life. And it's never what they failed at, it's what they failed to try. If only I had the guts to be a musician, if only I had done this, if only I had asked her out, you know, whatever it might be. Don't live a life of regret. And you will fail. And that will propel you forward. Because when you fail, you don't end up where you started. You either earn or you learn. But either way, you're better off. Backers would rather invest in a company where the founder had a failure than one that had never done a company before. Because they know that you've learned.
So there are two things here. One is, I think a lot of people find it very challenging is to, if they leave everything to try something that they're passionate about and something that they think that they can be really big in, but in order to do that, you know, get that enough time, they have to leave their job, and then with the job you have security of your mortgages and your ends meet, right? How do you really put that in your mind that, okay, fine?
Well, there's many ways. So there was a young man who was an immigrant, similar to Vin, who came to this country, and he wanted to start his own business. And so he decided when he was quite young, just out of high school, could he live for a month on $30, $1 a day? And he figured if he could live for $1 a day, he would always be able to make $30 in a month. So he could take the risk. So by living on top ramen and buying bags of oranges and everything, Elon Musk proved to himself that he could take the risk. And so his first company, they had one computer. He and his brother lived in the office. The website was up during the day, and at night they coded on it. They went to the YMCA to shower, and today he's worth $200 billion. But it was that step that convinced him to take the risks.
What if somebody has responsibilities, right? A family to feed, kids, and
what better motivation? What got me to be an entrepreneur is I had two sons when I was young, and there was a recession and there's no job. So either you go, my kids are going to have a lousy life, or you find a solution. I started my first company with $1. I saw Star Wars. I thought special effects in Hollywood was the most amazing thing. I knew everybody couldn't afford George Lucas and ILM. I knew nothing about computers, nothing about special effects, and knew nobody in Hollywood. But for $1, I printed business cards. My company was called Jasmine Productions, J. Allen Salmon, and it's mine. And I knew nobody was going to hire a 21-year-old to be in charge of their post-production. So I made myself just a sales guy in this make-believe company. I went around and hustled. And when I got work, I then ran ads to hire the people to do it. You only need two things to succeed: insight and perseverance. Everything else can be hired.
There is one more thing that comes on your way to be your best, and that is how good you are at something that you are currently doing. So your good comes on the way to be the best. And how do you address it in the first place? How do you identify that this is the problem? And then how do you
a lot of people think it's really hard to be the best of the world at something. If you want to be the fastest guy like Usain Bolt or something, that's a whole lifetime, and there's one guy. Or be the only person in the world doing it, and then by definition, you're the best. So when Vin Clancy, his idea was he wanted to do social media for people. Well, there's 40 million people doing social media. And when you're, basically a street kid, nobody's going to suddenly, Coca-Cola isn't going to call and go, here's $1 million, please do our social media. The world doesn't work that way. So I told Vin to look at what people were talking about. What's something new? What's in the zeitgeist of society? And make yourself the social media expert for that one little thing, and be the only guy staking out that turf. And even if you have to get your first client for free, the second you get that first client, you now have what's called a case study that you can show every other client. So the first client that he got to pay him $500, the next client paid him $10,000 a month for the same amount of work, and the next client was paying $30,000 a month for the same amount of work, because he now had a track record. And if you're the best in the world at what you do, or the only one doing it, there's scarcity. So anybody that then needs that service is willing to pay a premium. And I've done that again and again in my career.
And an interesting thing that you say, that you be the only one doing it so that you don't have competition and you're the best. How easy it is, because sometimes, it feels like everything that can be invented has been invented, right?
I've never thought that. Every year, every day of our life, we see new amazing things. Maybe in the Middle Ages, when everything was the same all the time, I'm going to make a stool with 4 legs. Wow, I never saw 4-legged. But no, there's always new things. And more importantly, you don't have to invent from whole cloth. You don't have to be Doc Brown and Back to the Future and make the flux capacitor or something. You can take something that somebody already invented and just pivot it to solve something for a different industry, a problem that they weren't looking at. So there's a million ways to achieve, but it all starts with finding a problem. And in Future Proofing You, I again tell people how to do the 3 problems a day for 30 days. At the end of a month, you'll have 90 business opportunities. I tell you how to sort them and how to find the one that will make you wealthy.
And how did you address I don't know if Vin Clancy had it at all, self-doubt. And the reason I talk about is you talked about setting goals and setting micro goals and then achieving it every single day kind of method, right? Is it something that helped him to get rid of self-doubt, if at all he had any?
If you don't know where you want to be in 5 years, I'll let you in a secret. You're already there. Nothing's going to change. But the second you set that goal, I want to be a doctor. Okay. Well, work backwards from that goal. I guess I got to go to medical school to be a doctor. I guess I got to go to college and get good grades. I got to get into good college. You can work backwards. Any goal, you don't have to know all the steps. But once you start laying out and measuring and improving what you're doing, it gets down to daily goals. And every study has shown if you write down your goals, you have a better chance of succeeding at them. And if you write them down before you go to bed, you're not worrying about them focused because you got them out of your head and they're ready and you get restful. And then you know how you're going to start your day. It's not, oh, here's an email, there's an email, oh, it's lunch. Here's the, take control of your life. And if you start being purposeful, and if you have meaning to what you're trying to achieve, that makes it even more achievable.
So that means if you are having that purpose in your life, you would be more motivated to do.
Yeah, if you're solving something for somebody else, when I give speeches all over the world, one of my favorite examples was 3D printing. Everybody, nowadays you can 3D print houses, you can 3D print cars, you can 3D print anything. But a couple of entrepreneurs saw that a young child was born without a hand, without fingers or whatever. And they don't get a prosthetic because they're very, very expensive and they grow so much that they may not get a prosthetic till their teenage years, which means that kid isn't picked to play on the sports team. That kid isn't, their whole trajectory is changed by something that shouldn't impact their life. So they figured out how for like $15, they could print a basic 3D printed hand to change kids' lives. But they took it the next level because they were purpose driven and they went to Disney for a license. So now they can 3D print Darth Vader hand or Iron Man hand or Frozen Princess hand. Oh, I want the Frozen Princess on my team. Now the kid can be from feeling less than to feeling more than. Hey, Iron Man, come play with us. All by having that purpose of solving that problem. And so many problems are out there right now. At this stage of my life, I've run companies with hundreds of thousands of employees. I've run billion-dollar companies. I don't want to run a company. I don't want to do any of that. I'm not chasing more money. But when somebody came to me with a business that solved such a great purpose, I felt guilty that if I didn't become chairman, if I didn't help it get across the finish line, I was not being true to my purpose on this planet of helping others. And that's how I ended up being chairman of Greenfield Robotics. They're replacing putting poison on food as the way to grow food. How insane is that when you say it that way? We grow everything that we put in our bodies by putting a bunch of poison on it to kill weeds, to kill bugs, to kill small mammals, but it would never hurt us, right? And now we all have cancer. And now we have these little robots that just go up and down fields and take care of the weeds. No more herbicides, everything can be organic, and no more tilling the soil. Tilling the soil is the single largest source of greenhouse gases and carbon released in the atmosphere, more than all the cars. So just by doing this one thing, we're making healthier people, getting rid of cancer, making farmers make more money per acre, and healing our planet so we don't overheat and die. That's a pretty strong purpose.
Yeah, and it sounds like to get to that solid finding purpose exercise, you need a lot of people, like-minded people who are thinking alike, right? I mean, it's not one person can really.
Here's what happens with the big, bold idea that solves things. It's like a light, and it attracts moths. It attracts others. When I sold my first software company in my 30s, the internet had just become the web. And I saw it as a chance for equal access to knowledge. In the US, we have schools that are very poor, and we have schools that are very wealthy because they're paid for by property taxes. So the poorest kids end up getting the worst education. It becomes generation after generation of poverty. So I started writing about how we could equalize education with the internet. I'm just a guy with a company with a dozen people. And one day I get a call from the president of the United States. Make it happen. I'm like, wow. And he said, but we don't have any money. So then I came up with this idea, well, let's do an auction, which hired a guy named Pierre. That became eBay. One of the guys that volunteered, this guy named Eric Schmidt, he would go on to be chairman of Google. I mean, every time I built the first social network to hit 1 million college kids, a decade before Facebook, right? One of the things that we wanted to have on that was sports. Who was the young guy with the startup that did the sports and the audio and all that? It was a young kid named Mark Cuban. So when you look at my life of all the famous, the Steve Jobs and the Bill Gates and everybody that I've worked with, it's not like billionaires were calling me up. It's the big ideas made these people into billionaires. And their belief in themselves and the idea. I mean, how insane was it that Travis thought that Uber could replace hundreds of taxi companies in 100 countries around the world? But it was so much better than the existing way of doing things that it's inevitable if you don't give up. The only person that can stop you is you. And when that motivation runs thin, look over your shoulder of how far you've come. And you realize that the hard part's already behind you. You may not see the top of the hill that you're rolling to, but it happens every time. And that's really what people miss in starting a business. Most business ideas actually suck. And they suck because you're not in the trenches doing it. You're sitting on the outside with some obvious thing. But as you get into it is where you see the insights that let you pivot and have the success. When broadband came along, people were already dating long before you could swipe to hook up. There were computer websites, and they had a still picture, and you could read about the person and email them. But when broadband came along, they said, we could do this with videos. You could see the person's personality, their accent, everything. And it was called Tune and Hook Up. It was a beautiful interface, perfect business. Everything was done perfectly. And the business bombed. The first video, which you can still see, is a guy in front of the elephants at the zoo talking about why you should go out with them. Nobody wanted to date these losers. Their business failed. But because they had gotten that far with the business, they looked at the data that they created and they saw an insight that they didn't have in the business plan. Nobody wanted to date these people, but they sure as wanted to share those videos with their friends. So a year in, they changed the name of Tune and Hook Up to YouTube and became billionaires without a penny in revenue.
This is really interesting story, and someone who is just starting, so their idea is not that well known or hasn't attracted enough publicity. Let's say they're just one person and is still trying to find, what's my calling, what's my purpose? What kind of question one can ask themselves to really get some clarity about what do they want in life? And I know it sounds a little bit vague of a question, but a lot of people do struggle with finding their calling, really.
If you want to have a happy life, the best advice I can do is solve for others. Another buddy of mine hated the hassles of going into a store to buy blinds for your windows. And he just started a business, had no background in there. He'd been in the mortgage business when the whole economy collapsed from the subprime thing. But he noticed when researching that as something to sell that a lot of kids choked and died on the strings on the side of blinds, So figured out how to make ones without that problem. That purpose gave him a greater solution than just making money. And a few years later, the company sold for over $100 million. I mean, a purpose greater than yourself would get you through the rough patches because you're not in it alone. You're in it to help others.
This is such a big question about finding a purpose and what you're doing. A lot of people, 99% of people are just doing their day-to-day 9-to-5 job. Really, they don't think that much. And in one of your chapter, you talk about turning perseverance into passion. And I was, can you tell us a little bit more about how can one transform their perseverance into a passion? How can they find passion using perseverance?
So it starts young. One of my pet peeves is I hate adults that go up to children. What do you want to be when you grow up? Okay. As if you only get to be one thing. I'm a fireman, I'm a ballerina, right? When what you should ask a child is, what problem do you want to solve when you grow up? And at every stage of life, we see injustice, we see imbalance, we see things that we wish were corrected. And if you start looking at problems as things that can be solved, the opportunity will appear. And every successful thing basically is making life easier. You know, Henry Ford didn't make a car because it's really cool to have a bunch of parts and an engine. It could go faster than a horse. It could do things and pull more. And it was a great improvement over a horse. Well, it doesn't have to be something that dynamic. One of my favorite stories in Future Proofing You was a mom, and every parent can relate to this, middle of the week. Her daughter had to make a poster board for school, and she messed it up. And she's crying, mommy, go back to the store, get me another sheet, please, please, please. And the mom goes, but before she gives her daughter the sheet, she takes a pencil and does very thin lines across it so that her daughter doesn't mess up this time. And the next morning, she's like, why don't they sell poster board with little lines on it? Make a long story short, she went and got a patent. She makes like $5 million off the patent. No employees, no capital to raise. Anybody that watches Shark Tank understands that you can license something. And this wasn't a patent like the iPhone, fusion reactor. This was lines on a freaking piece of paper. There's a 17-year-old girl this year that I'm obsessed with, that for her high school science project, she realized that the number 4 cause of death in the US is hospitals. Not the disease you went in for, just being in a hospital kills you because you get infected. So she started ruminating about this, and she said the biggest thing is infection in stitches, in surgery. So what if you made stitches that change color if they were infected? She played with the pH in beads versus the pH in human skin. She figured it out. She, in high school, gets a patent, okay? She saves millions of lives going forward. What a failure I am.
Wow.
I'm on the wrong side of 50. She did that at 17. I'd like to just buy stock in her future. So you can't say everything's been solved, or if everything was solved, everybody would be happy. So there's huge problems. And you don't have to start with world hunger, world peace. You can start with as simple as make it easier to write on a poster board.
That's a really good idea. If everything had been solved, then everybody should be happy. So I think that's a place where I can start finding out the problems using your 3 problems a day.
Have you tried that experiment, 3 problems a day for 30 days?
For a few days, didn't do it for 30 days, but did it for a few days, and I did find some stuff. And I've actually, since we last spoke, I have launched something small. I will let you know when it's.
Let's see, you tapped out. The best ideas come at the end of the month. Because what happens is everybody can find 3 problems. Maybe everybody can find 6 problems. By the time you get a week into it, most people are like, I got no more problems. But you really have to pay attention to moment by moment, because so much of what we do is on autopilot, because that's the way it's always been. We don't think about how to solve those minor inconveniences. It's the minor inconveniences that make the most money.
Yeah, the tip I used was check what people are coming to you to find solution for. And I kind of started thinking about it, and I started noticing what people are asking me, and I did find a pattern. There was one particular thing that people are coming to me and asking different people. So I started working on that. So I'm currently writing something on it. I'll send it to
And as you know, I dedicated a whole chapter to $1 trillion opportunity that no one is ahead of you on. All the big guys, all my big clients, the Facebooks and Apples and Microsofts and Googles, they're spending billions and billions of dollars to launch a platform that anybody can build an app on for free. It's going to change everyone's life. We're not taking our phones out of our pocket anymore. And all you have to do, the earlier you come out with your app, the less competition and the more visibility you'll get. So, some of the big obvious ones of translate anything that I read with these glasses in any language will be in English so I can understand it. So I won't accidentally order dog on a menu in some sketchy country. But there's a million other things. What if I walk into a supermarket and there's 40,000 items and I want to only eat foods that are keto? Well, make everything else disappear. Boom, now I know what I could pick. Or halal or kosher or vegan. There's endless simple apps. And I could rattle off 100 of them that I guarantee somebody will turn into businesses. Why am I not running to do it myself? Been there, done that. I'm spending whatever time I have left on this planet paying it forward. That's why you can't hire me to coach, you can't hire me to this. The workbooks at jsamit.com are free. They help you get the most out of disrupt you and future-proofing you. And my payback is the emails I get from people that then it lit a spark. And if I can light 1,000 sparks, and those people light 1,000 sparks, then we start solving the bigger issues. And the biggest issue is not believing that you can. It's accepting the world the way it is and not taking the joy, the leap in life to make and leave this planet knowing that you made the world better than when you found it. I mean, I'm inspired by how many people I know that have created things that have changed our world. I can't imagine a world without Google for search. I can't imagine a world without a phone. Can't imagine without having a PC. I know the guys that sat down and had this crazy thing. There's a video of me. At one point, I had 7 of the top 10 best-selling video games. And there was a TV show called Lifestyles of Rich and Famous that would interview famous, people. And I watched it recently. And in it, they talk about that there are 5 million homes that have a computer. If I understood that nobody had a PC when I was doing what I was doing, that how crazy it was, that it was just this obscure thing, I shouldn't have started my first company. Bill Gates believed that every home would have a PC. How insane is that? You watch the original PC ads, it's, you can balance your checkbook. They didn't know what people were going to do with these things. So just start that intersection between problems that you identify, and you may find the solutions are out there not facing your problem. And connect those dots. How many people, when the pandemic came, saw their businesses shuttered, lost their jobs? If it didn't affect you physically, the horrible illness, a lot of people were crushed. But disruption isn't about what happens to you, it's about how you respond to what happens to you. I have another friend, Fred Joyle, who had a company called 1-800-DENTIST. When he saw the pandemic come, he said, wait a second. Dentists have to be in people's faces. Dentists have to touch. Dentists will die. So he got together with some people and made a face mask and a filter system and a thing, and quickly got them into manufacturing so that dentists could be dentists and save their lives. But that's not only a good solution, it's a $400 item that has $3 worth of parts in it. It's how you respond to these things.
Yeah, and just on that, the jsamit.com is such a great website. There's a lot of content that Jay have put up for free. He's so humble. I'm just talking to my audiences right now. The Jay Samit workbook for Disrupt You is amazing. It gives you step-by-step how you can do the things that Jay has written in his book. So even if you just go to that workbook, it will transform your life, really. And thank you very much, Jay, for that. The another thing that you just showed me is the glasses. And one thing that clicked is the Google glasses that came a few years ago and kind of disappeared in some way or form. And I'm just thinking, what could be the reason? Was it a failure, or they're just doing something in the background? What
No,
is going
so a couple of things on that. First of all, Google Glass was never released.
on?
It was a beta program, meaning here's a primitive tool. What learning can we get from it in the developer community? Now, I'll let you know that there is one business still thriving that just uses Google Glass, because they used it to solve a huge problem that Google never knew about, but exactly what we're talking about. So imagine for a second that you went to med school, you're a doctor. Here's your day. You spend all day doing rounds, talking to patients, doing everything, and then you spend 4 hours at night typing it all in. That's exhausting. That's a hard life. Now, there's a company that set this up, and thousands of doctors around the world wear Google Glass. They wear the Google Glass and they tell their patient, do you mind if my assistant is transcribing our conversation? And so offshore where it's cheap, there's somebody listening, typing this all up. Now, when the doctor's done at the end of the day, all they have to do is review and edit the transcript. Instead of 4 hours on their computer, it's a half an hour. What do you think that's worth to a doctor to get back 3 hours a day of their life?
Wow, that's quite a lot of time. 3 hours is like, if they're spending that time in consulting patients,
And
then
so if the glasses are $600, how fast does that pay for itself in a doctor's life?
1 hour less than that, maybe.
The first day.
Yeah.
Okay. So Google Glass for that doctor was a life-changing success. Now, when we're talking about what the new glasses do and the new contact lenses do, now that we have 5G connectivity and edge computing, it's amazing what you can solve. I mean, it's astounding. I have a self-driving car. It's the most amazing science fiction thing in my life. It's also my favorite thing. When it's not on self-driving, I have it set up that it's on, backseat driving. It basically, if I make a mistake, it intercedes. I can't tell you how many times the Tesla dashboard goes red and says, we're braking for you because I wasn't paying good enough attention, or somebody swerved, or this or that. I mean, those are giant changes. But now that we're having people create these tools that will make every day better. Our universe, with lots of sensors out there, will be feeding us information. So if my car 2 years from now knows that I eat lunch because I'm human, and 4 days a week I eat at McDonald's, and it's now 2 o'clock and I haven't eaten, and there's McDonald's 1,600 feet up ahead, it'll make a French fry float in the air, and if I grab it, the car will drive to McDonald's, and I'll get a free French fry with my order. How many other purchases? You're in the aisle at Best Buy that has printers, and you're staring at two printers to choose from for 10 minutes. If one of those companies suddenly made a coupon appear in front of you, what are the odds that they would close the sale? As opposed to giving a discount to everybody, you're giving a discount to that person that's at the point of making the decision. And supply chain information. So I could go on and on. And when I was working with Deloitte, big companies are already building out ways to solve this. We had one company that couldn't keep track of their own inventory. And they made big items. I'm not talking huge items. I don't want to out the company. And just by putting sensors around their factory, they could keep track of shipments and inventory and everything else. There's endless improvement that's coming at an exponential rate. So just starting with that growth mindset, overcoming the fears, learning from your mistakes, you will propel yourself through all 12 steps And just like Vin, you know, live the life that you deserve, not the one that you feel like you're stuck with.
That is so true. And Jay, you mentioned in the book that every new startup is a tech startup now. But on top of that, what do you think are the top 3 tech trends which are going to be massively huge in coming future?
So augmented reality, AI, almost all our interaction with businesses in the future will be with AI. You know, we don't realize how much of our life is determined by AI right now. What is Netflix recommending to you? What is, you know, what ads do you see? What do you pay for insurance? What do you know, all these are based on AI, and it's only going to increase in the most basic aspects of life. And along with those two things, obviously data analytics is a huge area. But even if you're opening a restaurant, it's a tech business. I mean, the example that I have in the book is if you wanted to pick the best tech stock of the past 10 years, it's Domino's Pizza. And say, well, how's that a tech company? The second they became app-centric, the majority of their employees work in IT. They now can see trends, they can localize, they can test market. They have a direct feedback mechanism with their customer. That blew everybody else out. Now, Disney's doing that at the theme parks. You know, if you're taking little kids through a theme park, you're waiting in line for an hour to get on the ride. By the time the kid gets off, they're hungry and cranky. But now you can have an app, order the food. By the time you get off the ride, it's just waiting for you. I mean, that little problem solved probably will increase the amount of food that people purchase. So you don't have to invent these, you know, anti-gravity chutes, you know, you just have to solve one annoying problem and you'll make a fortune.
Interesting. I mean, I'm just thinking of when you go to Universal Studio or Disney World, for example, and standing in the queue spending 40 minutes. Maybe you think that after that, I'll go and stand in a queue to buy some food. And if you have all of these things connected on your app, then you can time it so well that you don't have to waste time, really, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, having the world respond to your wants and needs before you express them is really what big data is all about. Imagine going to a store wearing your glasses, and it's a department store that you bought from before. They know which clothing pieces you own. All the mannequins now have your body shape, and they have some of the pieces that you own mixed and matched with new items. So you don't have to be a designer and go, wow, that jacket would look great with those pants. I'm going to buy that jacket. Science fiction? No, you're going to see it. Because 5G will allow that type of experience, it will bring back physical retail, which will be able to do something that you can't do in your home. The sports experience hasn't changed since the Coliseum. You sit in an amphitheater, watching it is better at home, right? You have to go wait in a queue to get food. You have to wait in lines for the set. Now imagine that you can see floating above the instant replays, the scores, the betting, how your fantasy team's doing. You can touch here and order your food and it comes right to you. Well, all your parks are now being retrofitted with 5G just for when the glasses come out next year. So there are endless opportunities. And tons of people will sit there and say, oh, I had that idea. Yeah, but somebody else had the guts to pursue it.
I have to admit, I've been there.
Hey, when I started my first company, in the early days of PCs, we had 2 ideas that were top of the list that we voted on. One was a video editor. What if you could, editing video was super expensive. You used to go to these post facilities, you know, you could spend $90,000 in 2 hours. It was insane. So that was the Jasmine Clipper, we call it, Jasmine Video Editor. The second idea we called digital mailman. I could type something on my computer and you could then read it on your computer. There was no email then. Email didn't make it as the best idea for us to go after. You know? So there's tons of ideas. and there's always going to be new ones. And again, insight and perseverance, everything else can be hired.
Yeah, Jay, in the interest of time, one thing I wanted to know from you is what would be your advice to the younger people now, considering the fact that we are changing faster than any time in the past?
This is the best time in life to start something. If one thing that the pandemic showed us is that you no longer have to live in Silicon Valley or live in a major city or even live in a first world country. Everybody can work remote. So throughout history, you were limited to hire the smartest or best people within 5 kilometers of you. Now you can hire the best people in the world. You don't have to have rent. The infrastructure is in place. You can use Google and Facebook to find your exact niche audience, whatever it is, and instantly reach all those people efficiently. So why wouldn't you start? And whenever I speak in large audiences, I always get the question, is now a good time to start a business? My answer has always been the same. The best time to start your business was a year ago. The second best time is now. There's no time like now. So I'm excited. I'm thrilled to be alive at such a dynamic time in history. And to see the thirst, what I will admit, I can tell that you speak more than one language. I'm the typical American that only speaks one. I didn't write Disrupt You thinking it would be read all over the world. I was just thinking about the people that I knew, the college kids that I was teaching in the US. When it hit #1 in Vietnam, when it came out in Lithuanian, it's coming out in Croatian, it's coming out in Urdu. What that told me was people are thirsting for this knowledge and this change all over the world, and people are making it happen. Jack Ma founded Alibaba and didn't even have a computer for the first 5 years. He just knew that the internet would be big in China. He didn't know how to do it. He didn't own a computer. He had just been turned down for a job at Kentucky Fried Chicken, and that's why he started Alibaba. And I remember meeting Jack years ago, and I would have told you that this guy had one of those attitudes and energy that if you could have bet on him like a racehorse, you just saw it coming. So people were thirsting for this knowledge all over the place, and they're achieving all over the place. There's no shortage of capital. There's no shortage of opportunity. And there's no stranglehold that Silicon Valley has all the money or this place or that place. There's only one competitive advantage that the US has that I've noticed in the dozens of countries that I've gone to. We don't have the best educational system. We don't have the best of virtually anything, but our cultural icons, Homer Simpson. When you watch The Simpsons, Homer has a get-rich-quick scheme, it blows up, and life goes on. We don't have this shame, we don't have this fear of embarrassment, we don't have this fear of being the tallest poppy, as they say in Australia. And that has served us well, because we're a nation that was founded by people that decided to leave what they had, not knowing what they were getting. And whether they came by choice or were forced to come here, it was a nation of immigrants. And that gave them a head start. And that's the only competitive advantage we have. And now that the whole world can connect to each other, we're going to see the pace of innovation explode. Because what could be worse than a wasted mind? That there's somebody with potential, and I'm of the belief that everybody has the potential. And if we can just give people the little bit of tools that are going to disrupt you and future-proofing you. I mean, I'm putting you on the spot, but did your view of the world change from those 2 books? It's meant to take those blinders off.
Yeah, they're not small tools, I would say, disrupt you and future-proofing you. They are massive tools. They work. I've been working on them. I mean, taking the tips from there and implementing, and they do work. Totally agree.
And whatever time I have left on this planet, this is what I'm dedicating it to really, the middle class got wiped out. The bottom 140 million Americans own less than 1%. Most have a negative net worth. When you saw what happened in our nation's capital in January, what I saw was thousands of people feeling left out, left behind, clawing for leftovers. The world that they were promised of get a good job, retire, and have a pension doesn't exist. And the pandemic wiped out the middle class businesses, the mom and pop businesses. You cannot have democracy without a strong middle class. There's never been a war between two countries that have a McDonald's. Let that sink in. So the only people that can save society are entrepreneurs. The only people that create jobs are entrepreneurs. And yet we're not doing anything to create the job creators. This is insane to me. And so the more that I can get people doing that, the more that people can see it is achievable. The reason why Silicon Valley works is you could see the generation before that did it. So you know it's doable. Not everybody has a Silicon Valley. So the other place that I work is I still work with foreign governments to help them set up policies to be more entrepreneurial friendly, not capital friendly, not banking friendly. How do you change the culture? Mexico now has, I'm going to mess it up in Spanish, I'll say it in English, Entrepreneur Week. Semana de Emprendedor or something like that. I'm horrible with languages. But it's like Shark Week on Discovery Channel. Each year for 1 week, all the news, everybody, the president of Mexico and I did a whole big streaming conference. It was most watched video stream in the country, to give awards to young entrepreneurs, to highlight new successful businesses, to change the mindset that this isn't something that you read about other people doing in other places. And one of the reasons I spend so much time with my book now in Eastern European countries is everybody younger than me grew up in a communist country. They have no cultural heroes. They didn't have an uncle or brother, or this one or that one. So showing people how to do it, and we're seeing that happen.
You're doing really, really good job, Jay, and you're changing millions of lives. Thank you. Thank you very much. And only in the interest of time, otherwise I can talk to you for another hour and I'll have another many questions. But finally, if you can just tell our audience where they can reach you if they want to.
I'm the easiest person. So it's jaysamit.com, JAYSAMIT.com. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter. If you can't find me, you're not even looking. Because I get the question so much, yes, I'm the one answering all those emails. Yes, I'm the one responding. There is no team of people pretending to be me. I enjoy it. I enjoy it more than running a big company, more than, any of that, because I have a purpose.
Thank you very much, Jay. Thank you very much for your time and being here on the show again, second time. I really appreciate it. And I feel privileged to have spoken to you.
Keep up the great work, my friend.
Thank you very much. Guys, if you have not yet done so, check out jsamit.com. I'm telling you, it's a powerhouse of information. Do not miss it. And these are the 2 books. They will give you massive tools, will help you take massive actions in order to make your life, your career, your finances future-proof. And if you have not yet done so and you found some value from this interview, then do consider subscribing to this channel. I will see you again. Up until then, you take care and keep learning.